I think there are some people in the Democratic Party and who back some of these DAs, George Soros funded DAs, that do want to really hurt America and do want to bring it down. And then there's a whole bunch of other selfish politicians who go along with it because they want power. And so they go along with the radical left agenda, like Joe Biden himself. Because that's kind of the trendy wave right now in the
Mm-hmm.
party, rather than to buck the trend and think what's in the best interest of the country.
Hello and welcome to Reasoned UK with me, Darren Grimes. If you enjoy today's content, please do consider hitting that subscribe button and the little notification bell that resides next to it so you don't miss out on any future content. Now, folks, as you'll be well aware by now, former President Donald J. Trump faces 34 felony charges of falsifying business records. Now, these charges all relate to $130,000 worth of hush money by the lawyer Michael Cohen to the porn star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election to allegedly prevent her discussing allegations that she had an affair with President Trump in 2007. Now, some have argued that the charges against Trump are weak and nakedly political, a political move designed to go after the man they're still so angry ever dared become president and beat, of course, Hillary Clinton. It's perhaps less a case made by a district attorney to some, and more a Democrat attorney. I mean, you'd certainly think with Manhattan's crime rate being as big as it is, that a prosecutor time and court time being taken up for this circus would be better used elsewhere. It strikes me that Trump derangement syndrome is very much at play here. Now, to discuss all of this, I'm joined by the oracle of all things US politics, the wonderful Sarah Elliott. Sarah, thank you very much for joining me today. Now, on this very channel, we've spoken about Trump quite a lot, Sarah, but you've been on a journey, right, with President Trump. You did actually vote for him, correct me if I'm wrong, in the 2020 election, but now you think it's time for the Republican Party, a party that you're a down-ticket Republican, you think they should move on from Trump. But with that said, Sarah, do you think that is this Democrat election meddling?
Hi, Darren. Thanks so much for having me on. I have been on a journey with Trump, and I would say I rescinded my support for Trump after the election and January 6th shenanigans. But I have to say, this is really stinky politically motivated, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, by the way, many other people who are not supporters by Trump, because this is a very flimsy case, very weak case against the former president. And it's the first time in American history there's ever been an indictment of a US president. And let me spell out why I think this is a flimsy case. And don't take my word for it. This is what the former chairman of the Federal Elections Commission is saying. This is what lawyers are saying, and editorial boards across the United States, okay? Including the Washington Post, which tends to be very much so left-leaning. So if it was you and I, Darren, just average day Joe candidate, this case would not be brought against us. This is really trying to find a needle in the haystack. It is very technical. So he has 34 charges against him. However, Alvin Bragg, the district attorney of Manhattan, who, by the way, campaigned for his position and was very anti-Trump in his election, in his campaign, saying that he was very well versed in going after someone like President Trump. There's also been a lot of internal pressure for him to go after Donald Trump as the Manhattan DA. And it just never would have come to pass if you and I were the guy. And I don't think it would have come to pass if Donald Trump was not running for president. Okay. But because he is running for president, they have more of an impetus to bring these so-called charges forward. But as of Friday, the other day, Tuesday, when the indictment was released and shown to the public, the DA could not even name the crime, the specific law that Donald Trump violated, which, by the way, is against Donald Trump's rights as a defendant. He needs to know what crime he has committed in order to put together a good defense. So perhaps this case will be thrown out technically, dismissed by a judge going forward. And I'm sure there are appeals process in motion to make that happen. But the DA has said he's violated New York state election laws. He's violated campaign laws and federal campaign violations, as well as some tax accounting laws as well, some conspiracies to tax evade, etc. So he hasn't spelled out what laws exactly the former president has violated, but he's violated those three. It seems to be more of a charge in search of a crime. Analysts all across the country are scratching their heads that if you are going to prosecute a former president, you better have a rock solid case. You better be able to take the country with you. It better not smell of a rat. And unfortunately, that's all this does. And he hasn't spelled out anything. Let me make clear to your viewers that paying hush money is not a crime, right? But they are saying that the way he paid it and the way he went about it, covering it up, so to speak, is where the crime was committed. But again, the DA hasn't even spelled out a specific crime here. He's just said it has violated state election law, which, by the way, he was a federal candidate, so how would that violate a New York state election law? It said it violated federal election law. Former FEC Chair Brad Smith said he doesn't think it breaks any of those violations because he paid it with his personal money. And for a federal election law to be violated, it has to be an objective cost, not a subjective cost. And you have to prove intent, that he didn't pay Stormy Daniels to protect his marriage or to protect his business interests. This wasn't just to protect himself running for president. By the way, these are misdemeanors. We don't see where the felony is a step up from a misdemeanor, and it requires sometimes jail time, although that's very rare for first-time offenders like Donald Trump. So where is all this going? It's just one massive circus, and it doesn't look like these charges will stick. People are just scratching their heads and really angry and fed up that the Democrats would stoop this low. I mean, even when Donald Trump went to the White House and he said he would lock her up, Hillary Clinton, who ended up spying on his campaign and throwing around and paying for a fake dossier by Christopher Steele, which, by the way, they broke a campaign finance violation as well, law, and had to pay $100,000. Something to that amount. So he never went in and after the former candidate, because you know what? I think it really would have been too much for the country. And you don't do that. You don't go after your political rivals quite like that. You have to have solid crimes and backup. And this is just very disappointing because it's setting a very bad precedent in America, where I can see a Republican DA somewhere else in the country wanting to do this against Democrats to get their name well known. And that's horrible. It's a tit for tat kind of thing. And my final point is that, you know, his predecessor as the Manhattan DA turned this down. So did the feds. The Department of Justice said this is not a case worth pursuing. And now it's out of the statute of limitations, especially for the misdemeanor charges. So, you know, I don't know where they take this and where this goes, but it just has put Trump back as the face of the Republican Party, which I don't think is good for the party.
I mean, to be honest with you, Sarah, it's reminded me of why I liked him, to be honest, in the first place, because, you know, the fact is, Sarah, right, Trump and Biden are being probed over the possible mishandling of classified documents, for example. But it was only President Trump that was raided by FBI agents that were, you know, executing a search warrant. You can understand, without being a conspiracy theorist, why so many people view this as a total witch hunt, Sarah.
Yes, and just I mean, he's had the Russian collusion hoax, which no one in the media has apologized for. You know, tens of millions of dollars went towards the Robert Mueller investigation that came to nothing. Two failed impeachments, really. Well, he was impeached, but not convicted. I mean, he's the most prosecuted and targeted politician in American history. And I just think that there's so much animosity there that, again, as you said, the Trump derangement syndrome, it's all
Yeah.
gone to their head. And in the Stormy Daniels Times interview that came out this week, I mean, she even said, oh, he's done a bunch of stuff, and I'm just finally glad he's getting his reckoning. Well, what kind of that's just your opinion. You have to prove that the guy has actually done things.
Hmm.
And he's gone through 50 years of investigations, especially by the IRS, on his tax handling and tax affairs, and nothing has stuck to him. And it's just not fair. This is not how you wield the justice system. And you know, you can go towards the way his campaign staff has been treated, and the way the FBI has been so aggressive towards him. And they, you know, I could go down a whole rabbit hole on this, but as somebody who does not want him to be the next nominee of the Republican presidential primary, I don't want him to be the next presidential candidate for the Republicans, because I don't think he can win a general election, and politics is all about winning. Um, it does make him more sympathetic. And this is why he has raised $10 million over the last several days. I think the average amount of the donations is something around $50, a quarter of which are new donors. And this does propel him. He's now double digits ahead of his supposed rival, Ron DeSantis.
Hmm.
Um, we're not talking about policies. We're not talking about the fact, like you said, that there's crime on the doorstep of Alvin Bragg. You know, last year alone, violent crime went up 22% in New York City, and he's downgraded felonies to misdemeanors. So that means people who have committed very violent crimes, such as rape and murder, are getting away with no jail time at all. What is going on here? You
Yeah.
know, and it's just really sad and disappointing. And the Democrats need to rein their party in. They
I
need.
mean, it strikes me as a total political prosecution, right, and a partisan system. And I think you're right to address the concerns around what is essentially lawfare, right, where people don't fight
Yeah.
politics at the ballot box, but instead do it in the courts. And I mean, Sarah, you're in quite a unique position because you witnessed what went on with Brexit in this country, and you also witnessed obviously everything that was going on in the States with President Trump. It strikes me that the two are similar in that people that lost elections can't get over the fact that they lost said elections and try to do everything they can to stop or get their man or get their vote, that being the vote for Brexit, by the
Yeah.
courts, by pursuing people and seeking to ruin them and all the rest of it because you don't like their politics. It strikes me as a uniquely dangerous path for both sides of the pond to be going down, Sarah.
Oh yeah, and you know it personally, very intimately, Darren. I mean, it's one of those things where I believed in democracy. So on June 24th, 2016, personally, I was elated. I was like, "Holy cow! We just created an earthquake," and now the British government's accountable to the British people, and everybody's going to get on board and make the best of this opportunity because the people have spoken. We're Democrats in the democracy sense, and we're gonna do the best we can to make this a success. I had no idea that the 3 years following would be absolute undemocratic mayhem, where
Hmm.
people were being so authoritarian and ignoring the will of the people. And that was the first time my faith in democracy was quite shaken. Because when people and also all these old truths about how absolute power makes you absolutely corrupt and things of that nature, I started seeing playing out.
Hmm.
And thank God, thank God, people came out and vote and shut them down in 3 elections after that to prove the point that Labour needed to get on board with Brexit if they were ever going to win. And thank God Labour never won. And thank God we got Boris across the line because he got Brexit done. Like, but it was like living on pins and needles. And I think in September 2019, I came back from the States, and I really thought at that point, I think this was right before the proroguing of Parliament,
Hmm.
that Brexit isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
That this just, you know, it's just going to be a really weak, we're going to somehow stay in the monetary union or something. And then with Trump, I just thought, he was kind of his own worst enemy, because I wanted him to be quiet sometimes. But then that also kept our enemies at bay, and kind of unpredictability, and kind of like, oh, we don't really want to mess with the US because they
Yeah.
got this crazy orange man there. So it kind of worked in his favor, it worked against him. And then COVID happened. And I think if COVID hadn't happened, I think Trump would have been reelected, because the US economy was quite strong in
Yeah.
fourth quarter of 2019 and going into 2020. We finally had wage growth for the first time in like 20 years. I mean, it was that's what really had propelled a lot of these populist candidates, is that people were not keeping up with the cost of living. And then you have COVID, which has completely inflated the whole machine. I mean, and don't get me started down the mandates and the lockdowns, which were devastating.
Yeah.
And again, you saw people's real authoritarian
Oh,
streaks there.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, and the media. Again, we have a lot of lessons to learn. We need a 9/11 style commission to go through these COVID policies. But man, oh man, is it not going to happen until they're long gone out of these positions? Because when people want to hold on to power, they do so ferociously without even considering the will of the people. And just one thing too, let's talk about the Hunter Biden laptop
Yeah.
being completely silenced in the lead up to the 2020 election, when the FBI had it for months and knew that it was real. The Intelligence Committee, all of them, knew that it was really Hunter Biden's laptop, and yet 51 of the top most respected intel officers went out in public and said it was Russian hoax and collusion. I mean, how are we ever to trust these institutions again? And and then during COVID, they turned the social media companies on their own people.
Yeah.
I, it, it's absolutely an abomination, and we have to win in 2024. I don't think we will recognize our country, even if we can even do that now.
I mean, Sarah, it strikes me that the narrative seems to be that, if only Stormy Daniels had been able to do some kiss and tell story in 2016 before the election, that Hillary Clinton would have won. I mean, that strikes me as incredibly fanciful. Do you agree?
Oh, totally. And then look at all. Do you know, on the day that the indictments were released, a judge in California said that she owed Donald Trump $120,000 in legal fees for another kind of trumped up charge against Donald Trump, that he was behind somebody threatening her in a car park. About the alleged affair, and it was found to be false and a waste of time. And the judge ruled in favor of Donald Trump, and so she owes him like upwards of $500,000.
Wow.
Her word cannot be trusted. She's a porn star, for God's sake.
Mm,
She sells her own body for
mm.
for money. It's amazing. I mean, it's salacious. It's great for headlines and clickbait, but it's not a real crime. How many Democrats have paid hush money?
Yeah.
Oh my land!
Yeah.
Would love to see that list. But the fact that, Alan Dershowitz, who doesn't like Trump, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York, he didn't think this case has any legs to stand on. But it's to put a black mark next to his name. And it's also to make him the face of the Republican Party, and hopefully the nominee, so the Democrats don't have to go against Ron DeSantis, who they are terrified of. He is,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And he's great. I mean, he's music to my ears from across the pond, Sarah. But just finally, then, because I know you've got a dash, but you mentioned there some polling conducted, of course, after the indictment of Donald Trump. And it found that in a head to head primary battle with Ron DeSantis, that actually former President Trump would lead by 33 points. That's up from just 12 points in January. I mean, can Ron DeSantis win back that the ground that he'd made there? Because of course he hasn't actually formally declared, and he seems to be pretty robust on all of this being a witch hunt against Trump. So maybe he can, win the MAGA Republicans by actually being robust on this and saying how outrageous it is. Because, you and I agree Ron DeSantis would be a better candidate, but we also recognise that this is a blatant stitch-up, a political stitch-up against Trump.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't even declared yet. So I think he will declare. It will be after the Florida legislative session, sometime in May, June timeframe. The first Republican primary debate is in August. It's a long time in politics before the nominee is chosen. So a lot can happen. And also Trump has 2 other indictments. So he could be doing the campaign trail and jumping back to the different court hearings he has to attend. And maybe it will just be too much for the Republicans. And in the primary, they'll just say, we need to go with somebody new and fresh. We love you, Donald. You've been wrongly vilified. You've been wrongly charged. But we have to stick to somebody who can actually see out the election period. And we've never had a president convicted of something, and how would he live out a jail sentence as president? You can't pardon yourself. So it should be very interesting. But I think there's still a lot left to see here. I would not rule out Ron DeSantis at all. I mean, when you win a state the size and scope of Florida by 20 points and you beat your own record by 19 points from 4 years before, there is no way that man is going out silently. And thank God for that, because I do feel so much of our freedoms hinge on winning back the White House for conservatives. These guys have the Democrats have completely walked lockstep with the radical left and open border agenda and crime. And it's just really sad. I had a friend of mine, a British friend who loves America, and she went to do a business conference in San Francisco, and she was told not to leave her hotel room without a chauffeur or without security in Nancy Pelosi's district. And, she said the country feels like it's on edge. It feels like South Africa, she said.
Wow.
And and it makes me so sad to hear it, because it doesn't have to be this way, but these are people. I think there are some people in the Democratic Party and who back some of these DAs, George Soros funded DAs, that do want to really hurt America and do want to bring it down. And then there's a whole bunch of other selfish politicians who go along with it because they want power. And so they go along with the radical left agenda, like Joe Biden himself. Because that's kind of the trendy wave right now in the party, rather than to buck the trend and think, well, what's in the best interest of the country? They're going along with these very far left communist, dare I say, ideologies. And it's really a shame, because America is much better than this. The people of America are much better than this.
Yeah, I mean, my favourite country on earth, or beyond Britain, that is. And Sarah, we're going to have to get you back on to discuss Ron DeSantis and all the rest of it, the latest developments, because as you say, this ain't going away anytime soon.
No, it's not. So the circus will continue. But thank you for having me on, Darren.
A pleasure. Sarah Elliott, thank you very much. Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk, and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.